Okay, I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting to order for Tuesday, December 15th, 2020, our last meeting of the year. And I'll start by recognizing that we're on the traditional and ancestral unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And I will read Article 22 of UNDRIP. Particular attention shall be paid to the rights and special needs of Indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities in the implementation of this declaration. States shall take measures in conjunction with Indigenous peoples to ensure that Indigenous women and children enjoy the full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. And with that, we move into the in-camera motion.
So moved.
Second.
And we have an addition to that under the Community Charter Section 91E, which includes potential purchases or acquisition of land. And is there anyone opposed to adoption of following this meeting, we go in camera? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to adoption of minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. And those are for December 8th for the regular board. Is there anyone opposed to adoption of those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to petitions and delegations. And the first one is the Comox Valley Conservation Partnership. Tim Ennis.
Proceed.
Second.
Thank you. And are you there, Tim?
I am. Can you hear me and see me?
We can. That's great.
Fantastic.
You have 10 minutes to present this evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see your faces, even though they're in small little squares. I am very happy to be here today in front of you representing the Comox Valley Conservation Partnership. We're excited this year. Our membership has now grown to include 26 member organizations, conservation groups, and local area residents associations here in the Comox Valley. We bring each of these groups together in one common forum to promote conservation solutions to environmental issues in collaboration with local governments. So our membership includes some of the larger groups in town, like the Comox, Courtenay and District Fish and Game Protective Association, Comox Valley Nature, Cumberland Community Forest Society, Project Watershed, and of course the Comox Valley Land Trust, for whom I work, as well as some of the newer groups in town, like the Cumberland Wetlands Working Group and the Puntledge River Forest Protection Society, who I understand you've become recently acquainted with. So speaking on behalf of the thousands of people in this valley who are a member of one or more of those organizations, I'm very much honored to be here to speak through them to encourage our support for a regional park service. Some of you will know that we've been speaking to you about the development of a regional park service for many, many years. It's a part of our 5-year strategic plan as a CVCP organization. So to see it come forward sort of organically, it is very welcome news for us, and we're very pleased to see it. Next slide, please. One of our member organizations, the Comox Valley Land Trust, has had a wonderful working relationship with the CVRD's Community Park Service for many, many years. We've been very effective at working together and have accomplished a number of really important projects in our time together, including the McLaughlin Gardens, Ruth Masters Greenway, the Solon River Commons, and up and coming, the Father Charles Brandt Hermitage on the Oyster River, as well as the Morrison Creek Conservation Area. And through a different format, have also worked with the CVRD very effectively in partnership with the Cumberland Community Forest Society on recent activity to protect Perseverance Creek in Cumberland as well. So with CVRD support and working together, we've really been able to leverage on each other's strengths to achieve greater conservation successes, I think, than what could have happened if we had worked in isolation. And a great example of that is with the Morrison Creek Conservation Area. In this case, the CVRD Community Park Service contributed 1/3 of the fair market value of the property, and the Comox Valley Land Trust was able to raise the other 2/3 of the value of the property from sources that are outside of our community, from donors and foundations further afield, as well as from community donations, I should add, and that was a really significant component. And so we've been able to leverage the CVRD Parks contribution significantly, spreading your dollars further. And so it's through these kinds of partnerships that working together with the Regional Park Service, I think, could be expanded in the future. And we know, of course, that through the Cumberland Community Forest Society and Project Watershed, just how powerful our ENGO land acquisition capabilities really are here in the Valley. We've got quite a powerful group here. So next slide, please. I want to point out, and I'm sure that all of you are aware, there are some very important front burner conservation opportunities of regional significance in front of us right now. And, you know, these are places that a great many people in our community enjoy, either to recreate or for their conservation benefits. And that doesn't matter whether they live in an electoral area or in a municipality. These are places that are commonly enjoyed by everybody here. And if we are to protect some of these places, given their size and potential expense, collaboration is really the only way that we're going to be able to do this. Next slide, please. So the CVCP and our partner organizations and our staff and our board members, we have extensive experience working with regional park services, not just here in the Valley, but throughout British Columbia. You know, I myself am actively working on a project right now in Saanich that is being funded through a regional park service. And others on the board of directors of the CVLT have extensive experience with these from Metro Vancouver and other places as well. Also through our connections to the other conservation partnerships in British Columbia, like the South Okanagan Conservation Partnership or the Kootenay Conservation Partnership, we have experience and connections with people that have even more experience with different modes of implementation of these kinds of opportunities. So the CVCP stands available as a resource to help with the development of a regional park service that is sort of arranged to maximally benefit the potential for ENGO partnerships, whether that is through land acquisition or stewardship or both. So we wholeheartedly encourage the CVRD board to reactivate the Regional Park Service. And, you know, simply put, I think together we could do more or with more. And that's really what all I had to say today. And I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you and to express our feelings on this particular issue.
Great, thanks. Are you open to questions, Tim?
I certainly am.
All right, we'll just pull up the list of participants and see if anybody's raised their hand. I see Director Hamir.
Not really a question, but I just wanted to say thank you. And, you know, I think speaking for myself and possibly for the whole board, how much we appreciate the value of our partnerships with groups like yours, and you know, the ability for you to make public dollars go even farther in land acquisition is considerable. And I just want to thank you for being open to working with us and highlighting some of those opportunities that are there in the Valley. So thanks.
Thank you.
And Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly echo those thanks and the gratitude that we have such a rich community full of volunteers and folks with expertise such as yourself, Tim, who are willing to put it to the community and our environment's benefit. I just wonder if I noticed a picture of a bat in the slide there, and I wonder if you want to comment on both your unique relationship to bats and the relationship between our wild creatures and the conservation efforts that we might engage in.
Well, that's a fantastic question, Doug. And I think I will gloss over my unique connection with bats. As I think most of you know, I do bat research as a part of my living. But what this slide is really representing, for those of you that don't know, is these are some of the species at risk in the valley that live on some of these front burner properties that I'm talking about. So on the left side, there is a western painted turtle. There's only one place left in the valley where those occur. And then, of course, the Townsend's big-eared bat is the one that you see in the top right there, also a species at risk and a creature that inhabits mature forests in our area. To the bottom is the sand verbena moth, nationally endangered species. I believe there's only 8 or 9 places left in the world where it occurs. One of them is here in the valley. And then, of course, the barn owl, which we have, surprisingly high number of occurrences of in places, including places like Couscous, for example. And so these are just some of the creatures that I personally would love to see my children and grandchildren be able to experience directly. But if we don't make quick moves in some of these areas, opportunities will be lost for these species in our valley. So that's what this slide is about. So thank you for that question.
Thanks very much, Tim. I did grow up in the Okanagan, and we had a pond near our home where we used to skate in the winter, and it was a habitat for painted turtles. Of course, we thought they were just turtles. We caught them, we watched them, and when I was back there many years later, I noticed that there were signs up indicating that they were an endangered species, and that's been multiplied across the planet and across our country and province many times over, just in my lifetime alone. So I think the work that you're doing and that we can join in with you through a function like this is quite critical. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks so much for your work, Tim, and thanks for your presentation today.
Great, thank you. Have a successful meeting, and I very much appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Good evening.
Bye.
And is there anyone opposed to receipt of the delegation? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to reports. We have the Electoral Area Service Committee report from December 7th, receipt of minutes.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And this is a development variance permit regarding property on Ryan Road East. Is there any discussion? Okay, and it's a vote of the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and we're on to recommendation 2.
Move to.
Second.
Thank you. And it's a recommendation that the CVRD representing Fannie Mae Fire Protection Service endorse the renewal of a mutual aid agreement. Is there any comments or questions? Okay, this is a vote of the full board. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And we're on to item 2, which is the minutes of the Comox Valley Sewage Commission from December 8th.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to item 3, the Comox Valley Water Committee minutes from December 8th.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to item 4, the Homeless Support Service Bylaw Review.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Robin Holm is here tonight to present this report to you and answer any of your questions.
Good evening. Through the CIO to Madam Chair, we're here tonight to provide you with an update and information on the Homelessness Support Service bylaw review. As mentioned in the staff report, the establishment bylaw requires a service review every 5 years. We are currently in the process of undertaking this review. In November, Vink Consulting was retained to undertake this work, and their methodology has involved a thorough background document review, a review of best practices of the service model and revenue sources, as well as a data collection of outcomes for the service and stakeholder consultations. Stakeholder interviews with the coalition's leadership team and the coordinator and service providers and service participants have helped to identify key findings. Last week, a workshop was held with these stakeholders in order to validate these preliminary findings and discuss some of the potential options for changes to the service. The coalition's leadership team and coordinator and service participants were invited to participate in this workshop. And some of the preliminary areas of inquiry include the evolution of the service, how to incorporate evidence-based decision-making, and how to bring in the findings from the Housing Needs Report relative to the Coalition's 5-year action plan, exploring ideas about whether a community plan rather than a coalition plan to end homelessness would be something to explore. The idea of spreading money around further or allocating larger amounts to some projects, and whether to increase funding amounts for pre-construction costs, and how to include persons with living or lived experience. The CVRD staff will be sending out the consultant's final report and the key findings and recommendations to the staff at the Village of Cumberland and the City of Courtenay for information in early January. And we will be back in, I guess it will be late winter and early spring to present the staff report and final report. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks so much. Are there any questions? Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I'm pleased to see the start that's been made on this review. And of particular note, I think it's worthwhile looking at the long-term sustainability of the service. Of course, we all want to see an end to homelessness and would like to see the investment from federal and provincial sources that might help to bring that about. But in the meantime, I think we can all acknowledge the tremendous value that the decision to start this service has brought about. I'm just wondering if you could comment on the aspect of leadership and the role of the coordinator and the current status of funding in relation to that and what we might see out of this review in that regard.
Through the CEO to Director Hillian, yes, that idea is being explored, the idea of how to fund the coordinator position, whether it would be through the service or whether it would be another source of funding. That is one of the preliminary findings. I didn't go through them all, but you will be seeing that brought forward as a part of the report in the new year.
Thanks very much. I know that it was a source of controversy in the initial development of this service and the steps leading up to it as to whether we were going to fund housing or staffing to have that coordination role. And I think what we've seen through the success of the Coalition to End Homelessness is that we wouldn't get the results that we have if we didn't have that coordination function there. So I'm optimistic that we'll see some results that help us to make that a secure position. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried, and there's a recommendation.
Move.
Oh, sorry, there is no recommendation.
No, not on that, but there is one.
Thanks. So we're on to item 5, the Regional Park Service.
I'll move that.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Mark Harrison is here to provide this report. The report is provided at the request of the board that wanted more information with respect to the service. Mark will provide this and also answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm here today to provide information to the board on the Regional Park Service. My presentation today is going to look at the Regional Park Service function versus the Community Parks function to make sure that the differences between those services are understood. I'm going to also look at the CVRD Regional Parks Service history. I'm then going to look at the possible approaches we can take to activating this service. Then I'd like to discuss a little bit about why this service is needed, and then finalize with just looking at some examples of regional parks here on Vancouver Island. Next slide, please. So Regional Parks Service function versus the Community Park Service function, I think it's important that we realize that these are separate and distinct functions. The CVRD did get in the 70s both of those functions through a supplemental letters patent. Now within the regional district setting, the Community Park Service is really there to benefit the local rural areas that provide the exclusive funding for those parks. Whereas a regional park is really to benefit the region as a whole. So that's municipalities, and it's also the electoral areas. With all of the local governments contributing to the acquisition, the development, and the operation of those specific and those significant parks and trails. So I think historically, the region hasn't really done a very great job at differentiating these functions adequately. Next slide, please. So just in terms of history, I mean, the regional districts have been managing regional parks, the regional parks function, since about the 1960s. Our CVRD function was established in 1971 through supplemental letters patent. It is now currently dormant, so it has no funds on it, although it still is in existence. The original participants were the broader Comox Strathcona Regional District. At that time, that did not include Cumberland. There was funding that went into that regional service in 1972 and in 1975. And it went largely towards Crown grant acquisitions for parks such as Seal Bay Nature Park, Mount Jeffrey Nature Park, and what is now called Nymph Falls Nature Park, which at the time was Plantlet Shoreline Protection Park. So those three parks were actually historically considered regional in nature. And beyond the original Crown grant acquisition, the funding for those parks has been exclusively through the Community Park Service. So then in 1998, all the funds for that Regional Park Service were given back to all the participants after basically several failed attempts to agree on what parks would be funded under that service. Next slide, please. So how can we approach activating or reactivating this Regional Park Service? Staff are really at this stage envisioning a three-part process. The first would be a background study where we would work with the regional partners on this background study, and that would look at best management practices for a service like this that other regional districts are using. It would look at a review of service delivery models for operations, funding, et cetera. It would also look at a review of our local parks and greenways plans and see if there's any synergies with current or planned projects that could align with a regional park service. and we look at regulatory requirements to activate that service. Through that collaborative process, that study would be envisioned to be brought back to the board with a general proposed direction for the board to consider. If it's supported by the board, we would then move on to step 2, which is a conversion bylaw, where we could take that letters patent that we have, that regional service, and actually convert it into bylaw. The next step after that would actually be, is envisioned to be a strategic planning process. And that is the step where all the details of the service, the actions, the priorities, the funding models, management models all get flushed out. Next slide, please. So why is a regional park service needed? And I think this is kind of the crux of the whole presentation I have today. I think, especially with the COVID pandemic, it's really shown the importance of natural areas for community, social, mental, and physical health. But I think it's also shown some of the current deficiencies that we have within our park systems and the pressures on our park systems regionally, not just within the regional district, but also for the local governments. So if we choose to collaborate and look at activating this service, I mean, what could it accomplish? I think it could accomplish potentially connecting our core communities through greenways and active transportation. It could help us conserve and protect some of our more significant regional natural assets in perpetuity. Could help us acquire larger land parcels, which is important in a region such as ours where land is held largely privately. Could help us with the provision of ecosystem services and be a tool to help us combat climate change. It could help simplify discussions on natural area sites that span jurisdictions. It could enhance our regional tourism and promote some economic development. Could help us protect traditional recreational lands. And it could help protect the integrity of our watersheds and our aquifers. And I think these are all really good, just goals. And ultimately, the role of this service, if it's supported by the board, is really up to the service participants to define what they would like this service to accomplish. Next slide, please. So I just want to just end on just a few examples of regional parks within on Vancouver Island that I think are successes and show what we can, is potential that we could accomplish through collaboration. We look at the regional district in Nanaimo, Englishman River Regional Park, 207 hectare park, protects access along a riverfront. It also provides large conservation areas as part of that park. The regional district in Nanaimo also has the Comox to Parksville Trail, which is a greenway that's basically linking core communities. In the Capital Regional District, Thetis Lake Park and Elk Beaver Lake Park, these are all large parks that are located within municipalities that have been protected for the region, for everyone within that region. And now, of course, there's the Galloping Goose Trail, Lochside Trail, that provides over 80 kilometers of trail to help link those municipalities. And then in Cowichan, they've got the Sandy Pool Regional Park that helps protect swimming holes on the Cowichan River. They've got the Cobble Hill Regional Recreation Area that provides hiking, horseback riding, and mountain biking trails for the community. And they also have a Cowichan Valley Trail, which runs from the CRD boundary all the way to the RDN boundary in the north. So I think the point is really, it takes cooperation of a whole community to achieve some of these types of parks that are regionally significant and thus benefit the region as a whole. So at this time, staff are recommending that we undertake a regional parks background study and that the local governments work together on the study and identify a general direction for a regional park service for the board to consider. Funding for the study proposed under the Regional Feasibility Study Service. Happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Great. Yes, there's a number of hands up, starting with Director Arbor.
Thanks. I'm not sure I'll have questions, but I definitely have a few comments and remarks. I want to thank Mark. I imagine you guys are hearing me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I want to thank Mark and the staff team for getting back on the board requests to explore the regional park concept. I like that this study would explore the merits of an approach that benefits all of our jurisdictions. But I'd encourage us to look a little bit beyond the traditional park concept and how a function like this could also help facilitate landscape level conservation. Like, for example, how it could enhance our ability to apply covenants, look at sustainable forest stewardship initiative, including private timberlands, things like that. And I think taking that landscape level lens could also really help us with some of our goals in the RGS, which actually highlights the potential benefit of going down that road. If you think about species at risk, like Roosevelt elks, things like that, that need large habitats, connectivity, things like that, we could better explore through a function like that. That would be hard to do through our current lands of community parks. And obviously there's lots of partners. The Conservation Partnership, as we saw today, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest. And if we're going to do this, I think it's incumbent upon us to engage with Comox First Nation early on. So I'll pass it on to others, but mostly I think for the electoral areas, obviously we've discussed this well on board, but for municipal colleagues, I hope they recognize the value to at least complete this initial study and give us something to think about for the long-term benefit of the valley. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. And Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the report. I think this is moving in a great direction. Just building on some things that Director Arbor said, I completely agree. Looking kind of beyond the traditional parks to see what other aspects we can address, thinking in kind of a more big picture way to address some of the other goals that we have. I had a question about just sort of the historical piece around the comment. You know, it was part of the reason the park service, the regional park service, was disbanded, was obviously because of communities not necessarily agreeing on the priorities. And I know I really, do respect particularly Director Arbor's comments around that there are many important areas throughout the entire regional district in Area A that maybe the municipal folks don't know about or don't consider, unless you have a partner like mine who's always gallivanting all over the place in all the regions. So I guess I'm wondering, I know this is jumping ahead to what the study will probably address, but just maybe what other regions have done to kind of deal with that situation, and for moving forward, so that we can find a way to prioritize areas if we go forward with this. Do you have any ideas about what other areas have done or what the challenges were in the past specifically?
Madam Chair, in response to the director's question, I did reach out and personally talk to some of the parks managers in the other regional districts that do operate a regional park service. But those discussions that I had were very preliminary, and I think the question that you're asking here in terms of what other regions have done is really going to be one of the key pieces of information that the background study would help us with.
Right, thank you. And I just wanted to add that obviously the conservation groups would be very important, but I'm hoping that maybe part of the study can also look at broader community engagement in terms of, whether that's advisory groups and how those kinds of models can also maybe be incorporated. So thanks so much. I'll let someone else speak.
Madam Chair, I'd like to provide a little perspective too on when this regional district struggled with maintaining the regional park service and decided to put it dormant. At that time, it was the Comox Strathcona Regional District, and there were 3 distinct geographical areas that each had their own separate regional parks plan: the West Coast, north of the Oyster, and south of the Oyster. So it was a real struggle at that time, especially with 4 major municipalities with different sort of levels of parks function, to come to an agreement on what was fair and consistent and equitable across a very vast geography and region. I think this regional district now, the Comox Valley, has a lot of things in common with the regional district of Nanaimo, and their park system was developed at the time that this one was placed dormant, in that it is a more succinct, closely knit geographical area where the regional parks were easily accessible to all the residents of the region. And I think that's what we have going for us here in the Comox Valley to strike this up again and take a look at re-energizing our regional parks function.
Thank you. Director Grieve. Director Grieve, are you able to call in?
I'm here.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. It brings me great joy that this is finally coming forward. I know that I had, when I first was elected, I had conversation with Peter Crawford, who was a planner with the regional district and later worked for Courtney. And he's the one that tuned me into the fact that this was never rescinded. It was just put to sleep. So it's great. The time has come. I applaud the board. We have a progressive board now that it can actually look a little further down the road than maybe some in the past. My concern is, that we've got obviously a lot of work ahead of us. And if you actually read the recommendation number 1, it speaks to, all the local governments, First Nation, working through cautionary principles to bring this thing about. But, as this thing works itself through the sausage maker, through our ample local government and staff, my feeling is we could maybe miss an opportunity that's staring us in the face right now, a couple of opportunities, I guess, because, that brings me to my question, which is basically, in the button-down culture that is our regional district and staff, obviously, things don't happen by chance. So I notice there's option number 2, direct staff to immediately bring forward a bylaw to convert the dormant continued service. Now, I know that is in there just to address the immediacy of some of the emerging projects that are before us. So my question would be, what would this process take? Are we going to be waiting until 2023 before we actually get to a point where we can talk about a procurement of some of the property that's out there right now?
Madam Chair, to answer Director Grieve's question, I think if we embark on this this 3-part process, I think we could be looking at financing that, or basically setting up that service to be functioning for 2022. I think it would. The reality is it would take us most of 2021 to do the background study and then to activate the service.
So further to that, option 2 was put there for a purpose. Would you speculate as to why it's there? Is it a viable option to move more exponentially on this project?
It's providing options to the board. It's not our recommended option, but it's recognizing that the board may have a political desire that is more immediate than what is recommended by staff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mark, very much for this report. This was really useful to get a clearer sense of what this might entail. And I found the appendix looking at options or what approaches that have been taken in other regional districts really interesting. And one of the questions I had that arose from that is wondering how other regional districts go about making choices as to which is a community park and which is a regional park. Like, for example, the One Spot Trail is just outside the boundaries of Courtenay, and it's a place I go cycling quite frequently. And I imagine that's currently a community park. Would there be, if the Park Service was reawoken, would there be a process of going through all of our parkland and determining which is a community park and which is a regional park? Maybe I'll ask you to answer that and then if you could come back for a follow-up, please.
To staff?
Madam Chair, in response to the director's question, I think those are questions that really need to be fleshed out in the strategic planning process, which is the later or last step. As we kind of go through the background study, we would be looking at what each local government's current local parks and greenways plans are, and see if there's any synergies there for their current system or plan system that might work within that regional park setting, which could kind of help us in terms of a direction for the regional service. But in terms of fleshing out what is a community park as opposed to what is a regional park, those are kind of details that would get fleshed out in the strategic planning process.
Thank you, Mark. And the other question I have was more rather following up a bit on Director Grief's question. I was also curious about option 2, and I wanted to know, you said that option 1, that the ideal time frame would be sort of 2022. Option 2, what would the time frame be for reactivating a dormant service of that kind? How long would that process take? And obviously, if option 1 was proposed over option 2, I'm just wondering if you can explain to me a bit what sort of the potential downsides of option 2 would be, because option 2 obviously allows us to be ready sooner to act if we need to. So roughly how long it would take to reawaken a dormant service, and then what the downsides you perceive as there being in option 2. Thanks.
Okay, over to staff.
Yep, we'll just ask Jake, our legislative expert, to weigh in on the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So in order to proceed with option 2, I think the timeline really hinges on how long it could take to receive the consent of the various participants. It's one matter for the board to give 3 readings to the bylaw and then submit to the inspector for approval, but we would also need to submit that bylaw to the various participants for consent or approval. And could certainly take a matter of weeks, or it could take a matter of months. The risk, I suppose, in that is that one of the participants or more than one of the participants may not support proceeding, and so that could jeopardize the progress of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the only perceived downside to option 2 then, is the difficulty of attaining consent and possibly not receiving consent.
Dr. Marzo will weigh in.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I just also add, without the knowledge of the background study to share to your councils and people, and I guess the board, to make those decisions, there is a risk that they might have inadequate information as well to make the decision upon.
Okay. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. Director McCullum, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to staff for this report. It's great to see it coming up for discussion. Something I think is a really exciting opportunity at looking at this again is the ability for us as a region to do strategic planning around parks management and land acquisition. I think that's really the biggest missed opportunity that we have in not having a function that's working in that way. So I see that as a huge motivator for every municipality in this service to move forward. The other thing I really like is how developing trail linkages between various areas is possible with a service like this. And it is a gap in what we're able to develop as things stand right now. I had one question about how we define the difference between a community park and a regional park, and that part of what was described as basically a regional park has more draw and more usage from the wider community. But something that I saw when I lived in the CRD was that their regional service actually went after preserving a park space that wasn't necessarily for public access, or that wasn't the main objective. There was quite a large tract of land with a small lake in the middle that was purchased by the CRD just south of the Heartland Regional Trail, like the area above their landfill. And they did no trail development, no parking, no signage, with the aim of preserving the habitat of the species at risk in that area. And I'm wondering if that's something that we're going to contemplate with this as well, as not necessarily strictly for public access, but also sensitive areas that may not kind of fit with some of the examples that we just saw in the presentation.
Madam Chair, in response to the director's question, I think the objectives of the service are really up to the board, and the targeted outcomes will ultimately be up to the board, and those are again kind of details that would get flushed out through the strategic planning process.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to getting to that step. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Hamir.
Thank you. And thanks again to staff for this report. My question kind of follows up from the comments made during Director Wilco Hamilton's comments around your reply around the possible downfall of option 2, in that not having consent from the municipalities. I'm wondering if staff have spoken to either staff or the other councils to let them know that this is kind of coming together. Have you had conversations with your peers in the other municipalities?
We've spoken about it with the CAOs, but just to inform them that the report was coming forward and then to copy them on the report. And I'll just ask Mark whether there's been any discussions within the parks planners.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the parks managers have been discussing this for some time, so all staff are aware. Okay, and do you foresee, like at a staff level, any kind of hiccups? Like, if I'm kind of hearing that people are that the board is possibly leaning towards expedition, but at a staff level, like, would you see any hiccups if we were to go forward a little bit faster? Through the chair to Director Amir, you know, my general feeling is that staff are supportive of activating this service. Again, I think that it would be prudent to get some more information and have that information be readily available to all the participating members, so that we can make informed decisions. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And you know, I'm open to both. I wouldn't mind moving a little bit faster, but I can see the need to take a little bit of a cautionary step forward. Since I haven't heard from all of the municipalities, that would be nice to sort of see how the other municipalities other than Courtenay are, considering this option.
Thank you. So we'll go to the next director, Director Morin.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about option 2 and the comments that Director Grieve made around would give the ability to look at some things that are kind of looming now in terms of areas to consider or whatever. But I do understand the importance of having the background information, and I guess I'm also thinking about the kind of spin-offs or the positives from this COVID situation we've been dealing with in terms of that behavior change that we have for folks getting out into these areas. And I think even having a greater appreciation for conserving natural spaces. So kind of riding on that wave or that momentum, I think is also an important piece. And I'm just wondering if there could be any sort of hybrid of the two options that maybe doesn't do like a really, really deep dive, really comprehensive study, but also does satisfy providing some useful, important information, but also gives us the ability to move a bit faster. Do you see that as an option at all?
If you were to adopt the recommendation and ask us to inform each of the councils and ask them whether they would be willing to provide their consent to the reactivation of the service as well as the participants, we can put a letter together to that event. In the event that all the participants get back and provide that consent, we could act upon that. But in the meantime, if there is any reservations expressed by any one member, we continue to proceed with the work that would be required to do it in the long form.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Alternate Director Minions.
Thank you, Chair. And my question was relatively similar to Director Morin, but if it was the right process to go to all the stakeholders and do the due diligence required to make sure it's done right this time, if an opportunity like Director Grieve was talking about does come about, is there some kind of hybrid or transition that could be used for any opportunities in the first kind of 18 months before this fully rolled out? Or is it something that, if expediation isn't the only option, I think it would be a lot better to do the foundation first. But it would be nice to take care of any opportunities that do come up in the next year, which already are present, it sounds like. So is there any mechanism to deal with purchases that could come up before the board and still make them a regional purchase or park?
Those would have to be evaluated on a one-off basis and could be considered if any opportunity came up and that information shared with the board at that time. It's not something we would recommend, but if there was some unique opportunity, there may be ways or means of looking at that.
Thank you. It does sound like expediting also has its risks. So to me, doing the fair share of information with stakeholders and getting it right the second time around would make sense, albeit it would be more challenging. But I'm just learning of this, so I'm not speaking on behalf of Comox until we vote.
Thank you. Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the desire that people have to move forward quickly, but I'm going to just sound a cautionary note. We ask a tremendous amount of our staff. They have a huge amount on their plate right now, not the least of which is preparing a budget. And I think to add this into the mix without all the information presents a risk that is not warranted. And I would certainly prefer to heed the advice of our professional staff and go about it in this thorough and thoughtful way, which doesn't preclude the possibility that the study work is completed more quickly and then we can bring forward a bylaw. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say I really appreciated seeing the reference in the report to the sustainability strategy. on page 5. And staff may not be aware, but we've undergone at the Courtney level some criticism for not paying much attention or giving much reference to the sustainability strategy. And I know that it did come up in our first strategic planning session at this board, the idea of some type of dashboard or scorecard that indicates where we are in relation to the action items in the sustainability strategy. I think there are many, many things that we have done and continue to do that relate to that. And I'm wondering if that's still something that is on staff's radar, making the connection between all the good work of the CVRD and the sustainability strategy.
Absolutely, and I think that's another benefit to the recommendation provided here is to ensure that it's significant when you wake up a service, or it's very similar to starting a new service, is to undertake that analysis and put it in the perspective of the policies and previous reports and studies that are informing the regional district in its direction.
Thank you.
Director Grant.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking at the two options, and I kind of agree with Doug. I don't think there's anything stopping us from buying a park now if we wanted to. We kind of just stumble along the way we have, and we bought several over the years. So I think the mechanism is in place if there's one out there that needs to be done. Of course, funding is going to be the issue with how we figure that out, and I think that all those details really need to be ironed out. But I don't think it precludes us, if we use option 1, from actually doing something sooner.
Thank you. Director McCollum.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just as we're kind of mulling over the implications of considering option 1 and 2, I realize I'm making a few assumptions that I'm maybe not correct about, but were we to move on option 2 and things went ahead and as quick as timeline as possible, is it even conceivable that we would be able to activate the service on this budget, or would we really be looking ahead a year in any case?
I think on the basis of the information that Jake shared with you, it's out of our control because it rests with each of the municipalities to come back. So it's hard for us to predict whether that option would be acted upon in order to do anything in the 2021 year.
Okay, that was kind of the impression that I was going on. So really we could go with option 2 and still end up activating this in a similar timeline where we, not successful in rushing that process along. So realistically, if we went with option 1 and tried to do a streamlined process, we'd still potentially be able to add this service in basically 12 months from now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think I like the idea of option 1 in that case.
Thank you. Director Grieve, do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Basically, with no bylaw, there's no borrowing. Now, this is in our tennis court right now, and it's a political decision. As elected officials, it's up to us to bring our fellow councillors and directors along, because things move at the speed of business, whereas we move at the speed of government. They're vastly different things. I fully appreciate cautionary principles, but if you read option 2, it does not preclude engagement or consultation. It's all in there. It kind of gets it off the mark a little faster. I think that if we have the will and we get the political will, the rest of it will fall into place. I don't see any real pitfalls because there's still a lot of checks and balances built into just resurrecting the bylaw as it is. But my fear is that once you throw it in that sausage grinder, it goes around and around and around. And we just don't it's not like you're rushing into something, because as I say, the option 2 speaks to that as well. We still have all the consultation, we still have all the communication, but it just gets it off the mark. So that's where I'm at. I think option 2 is the best way to go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it might be helpful if staff were able to do a bit of the presumptive work of the strategizing up front, because it does seem that the original problem that caused the service to be put on hold, which is the decision of what parks would be part of the regional service and what wouldn't, would be the big question for the participants. So it would seem that if we had a more definitive model up front, and maybe that could be taken from the review, we could copy another region's model, just so that there's more certainty for the participants as to how it would play out, rather than leaving it open-ended and then getting to that point where everybody's participating, but we maybe can't agree on the model going forward from that point. So yeah, just maybe looking to staff to see what their opinion is on doing a bit of the strategy on the front end.
If it's the desire for the board to do the strategy on the front end, but consult with their participants, I would recommend adopting recommendation 1 and including the statement that staff consult with each of the participants as to their willingness to convert a bylaw if presented to them. I fear that just proceeding with option 2 doesn't provide any resources for us to do any work, right? We don't have a service, we don't have staff capacity. The feasibility study needs some money or even initial work. And so by adopting option 1, you're providing a resource from the feasibilities, and you're asking that we have that initial engagement with the participants, including Cumberland. I'm assuming you would want to.
Thank you. Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, a month ago, I think we weren't even going to explore this altogether, and it took the board pushing a little bit to get it here. And I guess staff, perhaps that's a mistake, but they did put option 2 on the table. And yeah, I would see value to, I mean, it's a 50-year-old issue, right? We've had this set of bylaws, so we've had 50 years. It's not just the people sitting around here. We've had 50 years to think about this. I think all of the municipalities and the areas are going to come with their own baggage around how they assess that value. And I don't think it's going to change that much, because I think the concepts are well understood on the value side. And I see, I mean, after receipt, I'd be prepared to test option 2 and no love lost if it gets defeated. But I see enough interest at this table to consider, as Director Grief said, a little fast track approach. There doesn't seem to be exceptional downside to that, and if it gets defeated, we can go back to option 1. So after receipt, I'll propose. I'll move option 2.
We're not on receipt. Yes, we are. Okay, we'll move receipt then. Is anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Is there any further discussion?
I'll move option 2.
Second.
Okay. Director Hamir?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the movers, so option 2 without feasibility study funding, like just as it is?
Edwin here, if I think what we're really looking for is kind of a hybrid. And I don't know how we can come up with that. I look to CAO and staff to see if we can expedite this in some way, shape, or form, because it's long overdue and the time is now.
Well, I think staff understand the urgency of it if we did go with option 1.
And if I can just comment, if we go with option 2 without the funding that staff have asked for, I don't think I could support it. So.
And Director Morin?
Yes, that was exactly my point. I could support option 2 if the funding from option 1 was there. Yeah, I hear our CAO's points about that. I mean, I was thinking more of choosing option 1 and putting some of option 2 into option 1 rather than the other way around. So I don't know if anybody has some thoughts about how to reword it that way, but
I would, if I may, as the mover, I would consider that a friendly amendment to include the funding piece in it.
Just, Madam Chair, it's the board's resolution now, and that's not a friendly amendment.
Okay, so we'll vote on the option 2 without the funding. Director Morin, are you still wanting to speak to the motion on the floor?
no, sorry, I lowered my hand.
Okay. And Director McCollum?
My question was just answered.
Okay, and Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. I'll vote against this. I believe that our CAO gave us the hybrid that most people would support by suggesting that we deal with option 1 and add on to it the request that staff approach the municipalities to engage them in relation to this. And if that engagement is successful, my assumption is that we would then be in a position to move forward with the bylaw. I think that's a more prudent way to go. I don't want to put another expectation onto staff that we're going to fast track something like this, which has tax implications and others. I think the suggestion of the CAO to amend option 1 in that regard gives us the hybrid that people are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was just, I'm looking for, I'm not opposed to a hybrid model here either, something that, like, I get the urgency to speed this up, but I also get the caution. And I guess my question is along the lines of Doug's, Russ, you know, you made an assumption that if we went to the municipalities and all was well, we could speed this up. I don't like going on assumptions. Is that correct? Could Russell or one of the staff tell us if we could speed up the process by doing it that way?
Can you clarify your question? Director Grant?
Sorry, I muted myself instead of unmuting. I'm just wondering if we were to go to the municipalities and get positive feedback from them, if that would speed this process up. Doug was saying he's making the assumption it would, and I'm just wondering if staff could confirm that.
It speeds up the adoption of the bylaw, yes, which gives you a mechanism to move forward. Is that done within this calendar year? We don't know that as of yet. We'll have to see how it shakes out and how much time is taken. But you know, definitely with the participants' indication of favor towards the bylaw, that is providing us the ability to act sooner than later.
Director Hillian?
No, I've already spoken. Thank you, Chair.
Director Cole-Hamilton?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify with the amendment offered to option 1 and the amended option 2, it seems that in both cases the factor is external, which is the approval by the other communities. I assume that the timeline for that would be the same for either 1 or 2. So there isn't necessarily if we're concerned about speed, a time savings on 2 versus option 1 with the CAO's recommendation. Am I correct that it's roughly the same timeline, which is contingent upon the other communities voicing their support?
Receiving support for consenting to the bylaw from the municipalities immediately provides the opportunity for us to do this sooner than later, faster than just option 1 on its own. But it's not guaranteed. But it does provide that opportunity.
Thank you. May I just clarify, Chair? Just to understand, it seems to me that that in with both 1 and 2, it's the same process of going to the municipalities is required, and so the whatever delay that would be factored in because that would be the same for either option. Is that a correct understanding?
Dr. Marso?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the differences is with number 2, you're moving forward to bylaw conversion right away with the dormant service, where there's an additional step in number 1 of seeking the support of the councils ahead of that, and then coming back to the board and moving forward to the bylaw conversion service, and then punting it back to the councils for the 2/3 votes. Is that, I look to Jake also to add anything more to the process, but I think that's the subtle difference, and the timing may be simply just a couple of weeks, depending to a few months. I don't know, it's up to Jake to confirm that, but it still lies within the municipalities around the timing.
And just to distinguish, option 2 on its own, we prepare a bylaw and we fire it off to the municipalities for their consideration. No study, no background information or otherwise, because we don't have the resources to do that. The hybrid option that we recommended with option 1 provides us those financial resources to do a little bit of background and to provide that as well. That's the difference.
Thank you. Director Grieve, do you have your hand up? Director Grieve? If not, we're going to call the question.
You are unmuted.
There you go.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'll put my hand down. I think we've had a very fulsome discussion on this, and I think it falls to the elected officials to push this agenda. So it's over to us. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll call the question. It's on option 2, which is to direct staff to immediately bring forward the bylaw without review or funds. And this is a vote of the full board. So starting with Director Grieve. Director
You
Grieve.
are unmuted.
In favor?
Thank you. Director Arbour.
In favor.
Director Hamir.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director Grant.
Opposed.
Opposed. Alternate Director Minions.
Opposed?
Opposed. Director McCollum.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director Morin.
Opposed?
Opposed. Director Cole Hamilton.
Opposed.
Opposed. Director Hillian.
Opposed.
Opposed. And I'm also opposed. So the motion is defeated.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
Is that option 1, including the CAO's comments about consulting with the participants and giving details on the bylaw?
Yes, thank you.
And we have a second.
Already
Any-
seconded.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question. Director Grieve.
You are unmuted.
In favor?
Thank you. Director Arbor?
In favor?
Director Hamir?
In favor.
Director Grant?
In favor.
Alternate Director Minions?
In favor?
Director McCollum?
In favor.
Director Morin?
In favor?
Director Cole Hamilton?
In favor?
Director Hillian?
In favor?
And I'm also in favor. That's unanimous. Thank you. So we are on to item 6, the Merville Fire Hall alternate approval process results.
Move.
Second.
You are unmuted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Jake Martins, General Manager of Corporate Services, is here to present the report and answer any of your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. This report summarizes the results of the alternative approval process that was conducted for the loan authorization bylaw for the construction of the auxiliary fire hall for the Greater Merville Fire Service. Official notice of the AAP was published on October the 28th and November the 4th in the Comox Valley Record. The electors were subsequently given at least 30 days to submit elector response forms to indicate their opposition to the board's consideration of the bylaw. In order for participating area approval to be obtained, less than 10% of the electors would have to submit elector response forms. At the close of the process, 8 response forms were received and certified. This represents approximately 0.29%. And as such, the board may now consider adoption of bylaw 614.
Great, thank you. So this was just for receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, Jake.
Move the recommendation.
You are unmuted.
Nope, there's no recommendation.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong item.
No problem. Director Greaves, sorry, did you have your hand up from before or do you have a question?
Oh, just very briefly, a big thank you for staff on this one, and James Bast, especially for working through this. It's, again, been a long time coming. I think this has been 30 years in the making, so thanks so much, and we're going to get on it now.
Great, thanks, Director. We're on to item 7, the Comox Valley Transit Service Rural Bus Stops and Budget Amendment.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Director Hillian, did you have a comment on the previous?
It's just a point of order, Madam Chair. I'm getting a lot of reverb on a number of people's microphones, and I'm wondering if it's just me or if it's a system problem.
We can hear it too. I think it's when we unmute Director Grieve.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we can correct it or not, but
do you hear it now?
Sounds better now.
Okay, thank you. So we're on item 7. It's been first and seconded, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much. Mike Zabarski is here on the line, and Mike, I'll put you on the spot. If you could just provide a bit of a summary as to the significance of this project and answer any questions.
Yes, thanks for the CAO to Madam Chair and the board. Just to confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, just a quick overview. For the last few years, we've been working with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to establish a network of bus stops in the rural areas. They previously would implement these projects on our behalf using a funding program called the Minor Betterment program that the province administered. And this year they've suggested that CVRD take on the role of implementation of these projects utilizing those provincial funds. So they would be transferring those funds to us through an agreement, and we would be hiring a contractor to install these bus stops. The most immediate project that we're looking at would begin in January and would involve 3 bus pullouts with pads for future bus shelters, and they would be on Highway 19A at Endall Road and Ships Point Road, where we have the two community halls, one being the Fanny Bay Community Hall and one being the Black Creek Community Center, actually. And we're looking at those locations as a bit of a transportation hub to support the activity that goes on at those facilities. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Mike. Director Arbor, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I think shifting project management to the regional district is good news and may provide opportunities for the bus stops to be even more user-friendly. I think we can get a little more control on what we want, perhaps. I'm not sure about that, but I imagine so. And I have some thoughts on that. For example, I think we could have a little bit more forethought so that they're fully accessible and weatherproof. Maybe we want to do a little bit of work around the sites as well, if it's possible. And I think it's a good plan on the coast to plan for sideways rain and scorching sun and cold winter winds. And I did a bit of research last couple of days. So for example, Quadet Regional District last year in 2019, I think installed some amazing units in their rural areas. They even have solar lights to provide extra safety feature after dark. And they seem better suited to our climate than the ones that we've had in the past. So anyways, those are just suggestions, obviously, but I thought I'd raise them, and I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. And I'm sure Fanny Bay residents and up north as well will really appreciate the improvements. Thanks.
Thank you. So we're on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. There's a recommendation.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments on the recommendation? It's a vote of the full board. Is there anyone opposed to the recommendation? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're on to item 8, Union Bay Improvement District referendum and conversion.
Move receipt.
Thanks.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And James Warren, our Deputy CAO, will provide a brief report and answer any of your questions with respect to this.
Thanks very much, and good evening, Board. Pleased to present this report. It's the culmination, I guess, of the conversion study work that the CVRD has been undertaking with the Union Bay Improvement District and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs since early this year. The conversion study itself was concluded towards the end of October, and that included outreach to UVID to understand its water systems, its fire systems, and present some of the pros and cons of either converting to regional district services or continuing on as an improvement district. The UBID conducted a referendum on November 28th to ask its public that very question around conversion. And the results of the conversion referendum were that 72% of the landowners voted in favor of converting to regional district services. The next steps include the improvement district approving a resolution to carry forward with the process with conversion. The improvement district did that last Thursday. The CVRD is being asked to do likewise and consent to the ongoing conversion process. And so you'll see that's the recommendation before you today. If the recommendation is approved, then there's an extensive level of work involved in transition, understanding what the conversion will mean so that there's a seamless transition to CVRD services. I think that's probably as far as I need to go on this. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, James. We do have some hands up. Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just supplement a little bit, and I really want to thank James for his great work the last, well, it's almost been going on a year now in terms of the process. And I do also want to add some comments to the board so that you know what you might be signing on to. This was definitely a deep dive into the services of UBID as well in the last year, and we've learned a lot as well. So, and one of the things we've learned is UBID did a great job with the new water treatment plant that just came online this year. but our board should be aware there are many critical issues on the horizon. So on the water side, as many places around BC, there's a need for water mains replacement. Many pipes are old, and we'll need to approach this in a thoughtful way. And there's always discussion in the community around ways to protect the watershed around Langley Lake. So that's something that I'll definitely advocate for us to have a look at for the midterm or to long-term goals. And then we've learned, new proposed developments in the area, obviously, may require capital upgrades. So it's going to be a busy file, mostly for the ESC, but I think the board should be made aware of that. And then on the fire services side, a little bit like Director Grieve was talking about Merville or talks about Mount Washington, the community identified the need for a new fire hall in 1996. So about 25 years ago, they said they needed a hall. So I think that's something that I'll ask that we put our attention to right away. And thankfully, UBIT has already secured the land through Union Bay Estates. So the good news, that's one less hurdle. And one final comment in my notes here, which maybe I would direct more to residents. A 72% in favor vote was convincing, but this is a big change for Union Bay. And I know some people are still wary of coming into the regional district and may still have questions and concerns. So because of that, I'll suggest that we increase engagement with the community in the next couple of years with good information about options and decisions moving forward. And I think if we go with this, with the mindset that we're there to earn the trust of residents in that transition and be diligent and responsible managers, I'm pretty sure that everything will go well. So obviously a big file for REIA, and I'm hopeful that the board will support the passing of the bylaws today.
Thank you for the background. Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll certainly support this. I think if nothing else, it'll give Director Arbor something to do with all his spare time, taking on the responsibility. But I do have two questions. One is, are we actually taking on new staff in this conversion, and if so, how many? My second question is just related to the wording of the resolution. It indicates 72% of landowners voted in favor, which seems to imply that everyone who owns land voted. I'm wondering if that actually is 72% of the landowners who voted. And I would be interested to know what the actual turnout was. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you. So on the first question is, are we taking on new staff? So with the conversion, the regional district will inherit any assets and liabilities of the improvement district at the time of conversion, and so that would include any staff that are employed at the time of the improvement district conversion. And so in terms of numbers, that's part of what we're going to be understanding in full detail over the next 6.5 months as we're targeting that July 1st date. We know that there's some administrative staff and that there's some water staff, and of course their fire chief and deputy fire chief. And so there will be some staff that we are taking on, and that'll be a very important transition for those staff to ensure that there's support and understanding. This is a big impact for those staff, certainly, and it's a big change for the regional district in taking on staff. We've done a number of improvement district conversions over the years, and most of them have been much smaller than this improvement district. And so we will be understanding all those details over the next 6.5 months at the sooner end than towards the later end. With respect to the wording of the resolution, I think you're probably right. The 72% was the results of the referendum, and I think the of landowners is in reference to the fact that improvement districts, they follow their own set of rules when it comes to determining who votes, and so you do need to own land in an improvement district to be able to vote. As for turnout, I'm going off of memory here, but I believe there was about 500 plus people in the referendum itself cast votes, and I think I do know that I was informed that was one of the better turnouts that they've had compared to their general elections in the past. I don't have a percent turnout for you though.
Well, thanks for that. Just to clarify though, we don't necessarily have 72% of all the eligible voters in favor, just 72% of those who turned out.
That's correct. And we could actually probably make that change in the recommendation, just to be clear.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? We are on recommendation. Oh, we're on receipt. Okay. Can I get a first and second for receipt? Or we do second? Thanks. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? And it's above the full board. Anyone opposed to the recommendation? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously, and we're on to item 9. The BC Safe Restart Grant Program.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank
Over
you
to
very
staff.
much, Chair and Directors. And again, James Warren will present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thanks again, Directors. So, and Lisa's just bringing up a PowerPoint slide here. So next slide, please. So at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the CVRD provided funding to community groups to help respond to community needs. We conducted a regional emergency operations center and managed our services in a fiscally prudent manner while continuing to deliver core services, deliver on capital projects, and respond to community needs. Next slide, please. The CVRD undertook a response and renewal strategy, resulting in Rethink Comox Valley, which was a thoughtful review of services to support community recovery. You'll recognize these two graphics from the Rethink Comox Valley work that you undertook in September at the conclusion of that renewal strategy, renewal review. Next slide, please. So provincial government funds are now available to assist with the provincial restart, with a focus on supporting vulnerable populations, service delivery resiliency, and community partnerships. The province has provided up to $425 million for local government operations that have been impacted by a COVID-19 pandemic. Under the provincial formula, the CVRD was awarded $723,000 in November, and eligible costs are noted in the staff report, but they include matters such as addressing revenue shortfalls, bylaw enforcement and protective services like fire protection and police, computer and other electronic technology costs, and services for vulnerable persons. And next slide, please. So working with our executive management team and looking at Rethink Comox Valley, the board's priorities around the recovery and renewal, we were able to present a number of options for the board to consider applying the restart funds. And you'll see on the screen here, these are mirrored in the recommendation. I'll just briefly touch on these topics. We do have members of your EMT here today if you want to ask any further details on these topics. But in essence, the first one being the Emergency Operations Center, looking at community partnerships and technology, recognizing that within the EOC, there is improvements that need to be made to our IT, our hardware and software to promote better connectivity and being more efficient with the service delivery of the EOC. As well, on the community partnership side, the after action report identified a greater need to liaise with our community partners and identify those priorities and topics that they have. And so this would be some funding that could be available to some of those community partners. It would be building on any kind of monies that could be available through EMBC and community recovery that would typically be available through a more traditional EOC or traditional emergency. Second on the list is the Comox Valley Community Foundation. And this is building on the success that I think the board had in March when the pandemic first hit, and we were able to partner with the Community Foundation by providing some funds to them. The foundation already has a granting program and puts calls out to the community. They also use these types of dedicated funds to leverage additional funding. The experience they had in the springtime was that the initial monies that the CVRD provided, it helped to leverage, I think, more than $350,000 worth of additional donations and grants to their granting program. Thirdly, is around safe work, public engagement, and access to services. And this is really directly focused on our information technology and ensuring that we have the hardware and software to be able to be more resilient should there be additional pandemic restrictions and requirements where we're forced into working in less traditional ways. Fourth on this list is support for the rural fire departments. There was additional PPE and expenses that they've faced, and this would certainly be a much appreciated supports to the recovery of those fire departments. And then lastly, we are identifying some funds to hold in reserve, recognizing that the pandemic we're still in the midst of the pandemic, and we don't know what the future brings. We also know that recreation, food security, and our community halls are all very much eligible project areas when it comes to some of this potential funding. And so we will bring back reports for the future that will be able to speak to some more dedicated use of those funds. And so with that, like I said, any of our EMT staff are here to be able to support any kind of the questions that you have. Happy to have that discussion. Madam Chair.
Thank you, James. And we have Director Arbor.
Thanks. I find there is a lot to like in this report and our proposed approach. I really like that we're focusing on strengthening essential services during the COVID restart and partnering with organizations and avoiding big statement projects and really focusing on the granular impacts and recovery. I like that we're putting an emphasis as well with collaborating with delivery agencies, as James explained. So all this I really like. I want to comment on how much the municipalities are getting compared to the CVRD, but that's okay. I do have a concrete suggestion. That was my little moment earlier today regarding the second tranche, the 283, because I read your report and I kept thinking, yeah, let's do things that help vulnerable population, but also help the public at large. And what triggered my thought was little things that maybe we haven't addressed yet for the long term. So I was at the sports center last week and I struggled with the paper towel thing and the roller. And then I went to a hall and it was the same problem. And so with COVID, as society starts to go back out into the world, we have really cheap technology now in touchless fixtures and things like that in bathrooms and public spaces. And I started thinking of our discussions around retrofits, and I was like, what a great pandemic-proof retrofit that could be to invest in touchless things at the rec centers, at our community halls, and elsewhere. So it's just a suggestion because I was bringing how do we maximize public benefit in small tangible ways, and that could also prevent future flus and other health factors, and also do some upgrades in needed places. So just a suggestion for staff for the second tranche, but with the first one, I'm really happy. I think you guys really nailed it.
Chair, just to respond to that suggestion, and Doug DeMarzo is agreeing to this, shaking his head. As well as the use of these funds, the recreation service is coming forward with a work plan and highlights for consideration of matters like this through the budget process. And so we will definitely respond to your suggestions here along with that.
Okay, so Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to echo Director Arbor's comments about, really, I see the list here as a really great reflection of the direction of the board to work with our community partners. So thank you for showing, really expressing that in this budget. I just had a couple of questions around the EOC budget of $200,000 $100,000. I mean, apart from the technology and systems upgrades, I'm wondering if staff could just comment where they see potentially like how that funding could be used for the other supporting of vulnerable populations. Could you expand on that a bit more?
Thank you, and I'll refer this to Doug DeMarzo to respond.
Yes, through the EOC, some of the discussions that we've contemplated is again reaching out to some of those community groups that we've been in contact with over the last 9 months. And we've also revamped our grant webpage. So if this is successful, we'd look at creating an application process and directing them to that for the EOC funding support to bring it forward for consideration.
Okay, so just to clarify, like it could potentially be used as a granting funds for some of our community partners who work with vulnerable populations?
That's correct. That's in line of what we envision. It could also be direct support as well. So there's two kind of paths there to consider.
And just a second question, if I may, the 283, the retained amount. I know there's a kind of a deadline for when those funds have to be spent. Do staff know when that, I guess the proposal for the use of the remaining dollars, when would that come back to us for a decision?
So the grant funds, I believe they have to be allocated by the end of 2021. And staff is anticipating that in the financial plan staff reports over the next 3 months, we'll be able to present the concept and details around the retained funds.
Thank you.
Next, we have Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was also happy to see this come forward with so many funds going to vulnerable folks in actually a variety of ways, because under almost every category you could provide those funds to our partners and organizations that support people who are having more challenges than others. And so I just wondered about, I know there's a bit of information about kind of the criteria or how the money, how it would be decided, as in the first one around the EOC and the EOC director as aligned with the community needs identified through outreach to community partners. So I guess I just wondered if you could provide a bit more detail on how specifically these funds would be accessed. I mean, obviously we don't want every decision to come back necessarily, but just to know how it's going to be done in an equitable and obviously fair way for these funds to be distributed through these different categories. Thanks.
Yeah, I think through the EOC and their director, they'll be able to create an understanding through the grant application process, allowing time for each group that's individually reached out to respond. And at that time, it'll determine the level of funding needed in the community, which could kick it back into a further report looking at some of those reserve funds, or we could have enough funds set aside to allocate it for those partnership opportunities out of the 100,000. We're not entirely sure on the needs, so that's part of the process of the reach out through a staff that's going to be specifically assigned to do that as part of the EOC.
Okay, so the reserve funds, it would be the same process then as the EOC category in terms of allocation?
Sorry, for the reserve funds, I might be premature suggesting this, but if it exceeds the EOC, we might consider bringing back a report to the board to take some of those reserve funds and move them to that EOC idea to top up that 100,000. I'm also looking to James for a little bit of thought on this process as we're kind of thinking it through as we speak here.
I think on the retained funds, we noted those three categories that we feel have merit in terms of providing some funding too, but that we need to present further staff reports, and that would be done through the financial planning process regarding recreation, community halls, and food security. I think like Doug says, if there's more value or need to direct some funds back to the EOC, then that could be a possibility as well. But certainly the three topics noted there were what staff would want to be coming back to the board with.
Great, thank you. Then of course, Community Foundation already has their mechanisms in place that work well. So thanks so much.
Thank you. And we're on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And
Move
there's
the
a
recommendation.
recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Recommendation 1. Are there any further comments on recommendation 1? And is there anyone opposed to recommendation 1? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. We're on to recommendation 2.
Move to.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments on recommendation 2? Okay, is there anyone opposed to recommendation 2? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. And we're on to item 10. Long-term borrowing security issue for spring 2021 for the Village of Cumberland.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. When our members borrow money through the Municipal Finance Authority, the Regional District acts as the sponsor. This first security issuing bylaw is for the purposes of the Village of Cumberland, and they are borrowing monies for the construction of a fire hall.
Any comments or questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments on the recommendation? And is there anyone opposed to the recommendation? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. And we're on to item 11, the long-term borrowing security issue for the spring 2021 for CVRD.
Move.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And this particular one is for the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service. It's primarily for the purposes of expenses for the closure of landfills.
Any comments or questions? Anyone opposed to first, second, third reading and final adoption? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, that was on receipt, and now it's for final adoption.
Move final adoption.
Second.
So it's a recommendation to be forwarded to the board for first, second, and third reading and final adoption. And it's a vote of the full board. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. And we're on to bylaws and resolutions for first, second, third reading and adoption. And we have item 1, and it's bylaw number 632, Comox Valley Recreation Commission bylaw.
So move, Arbor.
Second.
Thank you. And this is for first and second reading concurrently, a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed?
I have my hand raised, Madam Chair.
Director Arbor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak to that. And I want to thank staff. It's one of the things that I actually didn't think we would achieve this year with everything going on, but it does turn this bylaw does turn the Comox Valley Sports Commission into the Recreation Commission and brings in under its authority the exhibition ground. So I think it's a tiny historical moment, but I'm really glad that staff somehow managed to bring this one forward. I didn't think it would make the cut, and I'm really glad to see it. It positions us well for the future.
Great, thanks for those comments. Any further discussion? Okay, we're on first, second reading. Vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously.
Move third.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? It's carried unanimously. And we're on to the adoption.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to adoption of bylaw number 632? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're on to bylaw number 633, the Comox Valley District Security Issuing Bylaw. Number 633 for the Village Cumberland. And this is for first and second reading.
Second reading.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And it's a vote of the full board. Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Next, we have third reading.
Move third.
Second.
Thank you. Again, a vote of full board. Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. We're on to item 3. This is bylaw 634, the CVRD, first and second reading.
Move first and second reading.
Second.
Thank you. Vote of the full board. Is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We're on to third reading.
Move third reading.
Second.
Is there anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. On to item 4, which is bylaw 614, for Rural Fire Protection Service loan.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. And that's the vote of full board. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's adopted. On to item 5, the Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw 629 for adoption.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to adoption? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. We're on to new business. And item 1 is alternate director for Area A, Dr. Arbor. Oh, thank you. Sorry, can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Director Arbor.
Yes, thank you. I'm really happy to announce the appointment of Lindsay Flaws as my new alternate director for Area A. Lindsay's from Union Bay and has a background as a landscape architect and a parks planner. She has been on the area AAPC for the last couple of years, and everybody there has appreciated her contributions. I'm sure that it's no surprise to the board to mention that there's a lot of stuff happening in the Royston Union Bay area, and I feel really good that she's going to take over the role so she can attend meetings if I'm sick or otherwise. Of course, I want to thank Karen Ross, who many of you got to know over the last couple of years. As a fellow Hornbyite, Karen is an old colleague of mine. And in fact, I recall that Director Grant actually mentioned that he preferred her to me when she was at meetings. So that was a good kudos there to her. So anyways, I thought I'd share that news and I discussed with Lindsay that maybe in the near future, she will attend a board meeting or other meeting of our committee so she can familiarize herself with our board and procedures. So thanks for letting me have that update.
Great, thank you, and welcome to Lindsay. And is there anyone opposed to receipt of the verbal update? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously, and we will move in camera. Thanks, everyone.
Bio break.